Welcome to Spiritual Awakenings International Presents. I'm Dr. Yvonne Cason, the president of Spiritual Awakenings International. It's wonderful to have you all here. Spiritual Awakenings International is truly an international network. We have subscribers in 86 countries around the world, which is phenomenal. We love to know where you're coming from. So please write into the chat today where it is you're joining us from. I'm joining you from Toronto, Canada. Our speaker today, AJ, is joining you from Colombia. We have people from all across the United States. So please put in the chat where you're joining us from. That's awesome. Thank you. Anyway, it is my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, who is AJ Parr, who is a Venezuelan journalist, author, and comparative religion researcher who currently lives in Colombia. He attended the University of Oklahoma and the Catholic University Andrés Bello, where he graduated with a bachelor's degree in mass communication. He is the author of many books. His most recent, which he'll be telling us about, Stairway to Heaven, 25 Near-Death Experiences. AJ presently serves on the Spiritual Awakenings International Spanish Committee, is a member of our SAI Advisory Board, and also hosts the SAI affiliated group, AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist YouTube channel. So it is my great pleasure to introduce AJ Parr.
Thank you, Yvonne. It's a pleasure to be here. Welcome. I'm going to begin my presentation. Thank you. Okay, today I will be talking about the paradox of NDEs and religions, my journey into oneness, and decoding the Tower of Babel syndrome. I am AJ Parr. I am a Venezuelan journalist, like Yvonne said, Dr. Cason. I am the author of over 20 spiritual books. I am the host of the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist YouTube channel, and I am a member of the SAI Advisory Board and the SAI Spanish Committee. I am also the author of Stairway to Heaven. This is my latest book. It's 25 near-death experiences about encounters with God, Jesus, and paradise. It's a journalistic research on real cases. I'll be talking about this later. And it's part of an ongoing journalistic research in which I have interviewed researchers as well as near-death experiencers, including the board of directors of Spiritual Awakenings International. So why are NDEs so different and yet so alike? What does their contrasting nature have to do with the diversity found in religions? And is there a common factor at play? Let us begin with my story. I had a spiritually transformative experience that lasted 3 nights. So the first night, it was April 17th, 1991. I woke up 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I found myself in a place that was completely dark. I could not even see my hands. I held up my hands to my face and I could not see them. So I thought that was really unusual. So it occurred to me that perhaps it was a dream. So why did I think this? Because I had had similar experiences when I was a kid, and I knew how to wake up. When I was around 7 years old, I started having a series of nightmares. And one of the recurring nightmares was that I was on top of a building, a building that was under construction. And I was really afraid of heights. That was something that I suffered from when I was a kid and for most of my life. So one day I had this dream in which I was on top of the building, and I said, wow, this looks like the nightmare I've been having. Wow, maybe it is a nightmare. So I realized that I was dreaming. So that's the basic characteristic of lucid dreams. You realize that you are dreaming within the dream. So I said to myself, wow, if this is a dream, I'm going to jump. So I jumped and I started falling. And when I started falling, I said, hey, I want to be sitting in a sofa. I tried to stop myself from falling, but I couldn't. So I imagined, I said, okay, I want to be sitting on a sofa. And a sofa appeared and I was sitting on it. And then I said, I want to have a comic book in my hand. I was 7 years old. So I had a comic book, but I kept on falling. So I said, well, if I cannot stop myself from falling, at least I want the sofa to bounce when I get to the bottom. And that's what happened. I hit the bottom and the sofa bounced and I woke up. After that, I continued having these lucid dreams. Whenever I had a nightmare, it could be a monster, a witch, something, and if I realized I was dreaming, I could change the dream, or if I concentrated, I could wake up. So this practice continued throughout my life. So that first night, what I did is I concentrated like always. I said, okay, if this darkness, if this dark place is part of a nightmare, let me concentrate. I did, and I woke up. But the following night, on April 18th, 1991, around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up again, and once again, I found myself in this dark place. I held up my hands, I could not see them, and I knew I was there again. So I stayed for a little while, trying to figure out where I was, and all of a sudden, I realized that there could be something or someone hidden in the darkness. And just the thought of it made me scared. So I concentrated and ran away. So I woke up. I didn't know what had happened, but I remembered that when I was small, I suffered from sleep paralysis. And it was more or less the same darkness. I would wake up in the middle of the night. I could not move at all, but I was in this dark place. And I also had involuntary out-of-body experiences when I was a teenager. And I had been in that same darkness. But I could not understand or figure out what was going on. So I went through the day, and that third night, it happened again. And I said, wow, what is this? Why am I here? So again, I tried to see my hands. I could not. I imagined, or I tried to figure out if there was someone else there, because I felt a presence. And right when I was about to run away, concentrate and wake up, I got the answer. Yes, I was not alone. So I heard this voice, and it said, relax, all is one. When I heard this, I said, okay, if all is one, that means that the person who's talking to me is also me. So, okay, I will trust. And that the fear I was feeling in the center of my chest. When you are afraid, you feel that sensation in the chest, but also when you are falling, or when you're in a car and you go over a bump, that sensation in the chest started to expand. So I realized, hey, this sensation is not fear, it's something else. And it started growing. And it started growing. It became bigger than my own body, bigger than my bedroom. And it started expanding and expanding. And the more it expanded, the more I relaxed. And the more I relaxed, the more it expanded. So I felt it grew and grew and grew, and it was bigger than planet Earth and continued growing. And all of a sudden, it exploded. And I found myself in the middle of a star, or in the middle of the sun. It was simply a light formation that had a center that had rays coming out from the center and that expanded endlessly, infinitely in all directions. But there was something peculiar. My body was not there. I could not remember being human. It felt like I was, that was my real reality. I could see up, down, to the right, to the left, in front, and back at the same time. So it was obviously, now that after that, I thought about it and I said, that was another dimension. But at the time, I did not even think about that. I was in a thoughtless state. So I felt that all was one, all is one, and that all was light. It was an infinite space. I had 360-degree vision or hemispheric vision because I could see in all directions, but I had no body. I had no physical body. I had no memory of myself, and I was in this thoughtless awareness of pure bliss and pure love. I was simply there, being, and I could focus on the center of that sun and see the light where it emanated from, and I could follow each ray to the distance infinitely. And I could also see each ray of light and the empty space surrounding each ray. So I was, at the same time, I felt a huge emptiness and a huge fullness. So I was there experiencing both being full and being empty. Okay. When I woke up, I said, wow, what happened to me? I can't believe it. I had the memory. And also, I also felt that I was one with all. Okay. So I got up from my bed. I went to the nearest wall and I pressed my hand against the wall. And I was the hand pressing, but I was also the wall pressing back. I could feel what I later found in the Vedantic scriptures, Ekam Sat, only one exists, oneness, okay? And I also realized Soham, which is I am that. I am myself, but I am also the rest of the existence that is not myself. I am that. And only one exists. So I had this feeling of oneness for 1 or 2 weeks. And but it started fading and fading. But I realized, I knew that my reality was that oneness and that this was an illusion. How did I realize this? I started getting downloads during the following days. And I started writing them because at the time, I really liked to write. I wrote stories, I wrote novels. I had never published anything, but I got really excited. And I was reading Carlos Castaneda, The Teachings of Don Juan, and I said, wow, this experience is really important. So I got this download. It was a brief poem saying that in the beginning was the one, and I received the creation story briefly. It went like this. In the beginning was the one, and the one wanted to play. So he divided himself into two and gave number 2 amnesia. And thus the game began. So I realized that I was, since all is one, and since oneness is what really exists, we are all bits and parts of that oneness, but we have forgotten it. So I got really excited. I started writing and I said, oh, I'm going to make a book. I'm going to be famous. I was 34 years old at the time. So all of a sudden, I felt in my chest a question. Why? Now, this question meant, why do you seek the higher knowledge? Why do you want this gift? And before I could answer, when I was still hearing the question, why, the answer came out from my chest, but I did not intellectually formulate my answer. It simply came out because I want to write a book and be famous. And as soon as I heard my answer, I was really ashamed because that was the wrong answer. My answer should have been because I want to be a better person, because I want to grow spiritually, because I am your slave, God. I will do what you wish. But my answer was really wrong. So I felt embarrassed. I felt bad, fell on my knees, and I said, sorry, sorry. I will never tell anyone about this experience. I will never write a book about this experience. So during the following 31 years, I never told anyone about this. So it was 3 decades of voluntary silence. And although this is the first time I publicly speak about it in an SAI meeting, I have shared it in several sharing circles. We'll talk about that later. So after that, my experience, I said, okay, what is this? I must understand. I had been interested in religion since I was a kid, or since I was a teenager. I had read a lot of books, but I started looking for other people who had had similar experiences. So I investigated different religions. I became a Freemason. I became a Gnostic. I followed Hinduism. I got different initiations. I also followed Buddhism, Dzogchen specifically. And I tried to understand what had happened, but I never found anyone who had had a similar experience. So in 2013, 22 years after having this experience, and exactly 10 years ago, I said, okay, I have done such a big research that I want to share it with the world, but I will not mention my experience, okay? So what I had in mind was a book to express the following. I wrote this book. It's called Living in the Now in Easy Steps. It was based on this information. All major world religions, despite their differences, share the same spiritual roots. These spiritual roots was the experience of oneness. So all religions recognize 2 realities: oneness or transcendental reality, which is non-dual, non-verbal, and non-local, and illusory reality, which is dualistic, verbal, local, and is only an illusion or Maya. So I had been deeply influenced by contemporary authors like Eckhart Tolle and the Dalai Lama, but also Krishnamurti. But this information was mentioned by Adi Shankara, the founder of Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta is basically non-dual, and it talks about Maya. Maya is one of the earliest concepts in Hinduism, and is basically pre-Hinduist. Before Hinduism appeared, before the Aryans conquered the valley of Hindu, or the Indus Valley, there existed what they called Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma was the original, let's call it religion or spiritual path of that place. And it was based on the knowledge of Maya. Maya is the veil of illusion, or the veil of delusion. And it basically says that what we think is real is not, that there is really only one reality, and that we all emanate from this reality. And since it more or less explained what I had experienced, I got really, inspired and wrote this book. So transcendental reality is ineffable, non-dual, and known as God, the One, the All, Brahman, the Tao, Allah, Ein Sof, our source, spirit, supreme being, cosmic consciousness. But also, according to quantum physics, They have called it the matrix of all matter, non-local reality, and Carl Jung called it the unus mundus. I'll talk about that later. So non-duality was taught by Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Lao Tzu, Adi Shankara, Rumi, Meister Eckhart, Ramana Maharshi, Krishnamurti, Alan Watts, Eckhart Tolle, and all Zen Buddhist and esoteric masters, among others. It was also mentioned by Paramahansa Yogananda and many other gurus that have been an important influence in Western civilization. So the basis of all spiritual progress comes from discerning this transcendental reality or oneness from the illusory reality or Maya. Okay, so all spiritual experiences stem from a direct or indirect contact with transcendental reality, God, whatever you want to call it. Okay. So based on that, after I published my first book, I started writing different books as a personal research to see how all the religions reflected this truth. So I wrote a book about Zen Buddhism and Buddhist meditation, about Hinduism, but I also dwelled on the secret teachings of Jesus. And I found out that, yes, this was the secret teaching that Jesus only told his closest followers, and he did not want to share it publicly because of its implications. In non-dual philosophy, there is no good and bad, and it represents certain problems, especially at that time. Also, I wrote about Dalai Lama, I wrote Eckhart Tolle, and also Ramana Maharshi, who had a near-death-like experience in which he died or symbolically died, and he understood this truth. He was one with spirit, and that changed. He was only 16 years old at the time, and that changed his life forever. So after writing all these books, I started researching near-death experiences, okay? So I'm going to talk about how I got into that, because that was only less than 2 years ago. In 2018, I met the Spanish journalist Tessa Romero, with whom I partnered in several business projects. She told me about her near-death experience and how she had merged with the light. She suffered a clinical death and was gone for 24 minutes. And during the time, she told me she experienced the light, she experienced oneness, and she had this 360-degree vision. She could see up, down, to the right, to the left. And I was really blown away, because it was the first time someone it was the first time I heard a story like mine coming from someone I knew. And that was what I was seeking for when I studied all religions. So motivated by Tessa's experience, almost 2 years ago, I decided to conduct a journalistic research project and began to interview different near-death experiencers and NDE researchers. And what did I find out? I found out many things regarding my experience, and I found out that what I had was a near-death-like experience. And many people have experienced this darkness, which they call the void. They also, after experiencing this darkness known as the void, they experience this light, in which they find the union with all, or oneness. A unitive experience is how Dr. Yvonne Casas calls it in her book, Touched by the Light. And after this, I started developing my own theories. So the first time I told my story, I interviewed Dr. Yvonne Casas for my YouTube channel. And after the interview was over, she asked me, have you ever had a spiritually transformative experience? I had never heard that term before, so I thought she was asking me if I had had a spiritual experience? And I said, yeah, of course I've had. But I never thought she would ask me the details. Okay, so she said, let's set up a meeting and you can talk to me about it, and also to Ana Cecilia Gonzalez, who is the head of the Spanish Committee of Spiritual Awakenings International. Perhaps you can work with us. And I said, okay, let's see what happens. So when I got to that meeting, Yvonne started talking about her 5 near-death experiences. And she started giving details and all that. And then Ana Cecilia started talking about her near-death experience. So it was like a sharing circle, but only with 3 persons. So after they finished, they said, okay, so have you had any experience? And for the first time in my life, I felt motivated enough and told the story I have told during this event. For the first time, I shared my experience. And I wasn't sure if I was doing right or not, but since they had mentioned everything about their experiences, I decided to do the same. After I did continue my research, and after several months, this last January, I published my book, Stairway to Heaven, 25 Near-Death Experiences about Encounters with God, Jesus, and Paradise, journalistic research on real cases. And here in this book, I mentioned a set of testimonies that mention the being in the dark void, merging with the light, and also a series of characteristics that are common. So I noticed that something that many researchers have said is that NDEs are very different but very alike. So they are different, but they share common traits or commonalities. So this book is about the 9 commonalities I found in the people I interviewed who had encounters with God, Jesus, and paradise. After I had my near-death-like experience in 1991, I continued having mystical encounters and other spiritually transformative experiences. I continued having lucid dreams, and I had meetings with various masters and also initiations in spiritual temples. So this was something that was going on within me, and I had no one to share it with. Back then, I was still doing my comparative study of religion, and I was more or less confused. I was in what they call a spiritual emergency. I continued being afraid of heights. This was something that I had basically all my life until I had this dream. I dreamed that I was driving in a mountain and I saw this pyramid. So I stopped my car, got out of my car, and I saw the door open. The gate was open and also the door. So I entered this pyramid. I was looking, I was trying to see if there was someone there. So I went to the top of the pyramid, and there was a balcony. When I reached this balcony, I looked outside, and I realized I was in the top of one of the tallest mountains I had ever seen. And when I looked down, it was so tall. There was it was so tall that when I looked down, my fear of heights disappeared. Okay. I was so much impacted by what I was seeing, that all of a sudden I realized that I was no longer afraid. So when I was leaving the place, I found the keeper of the pyramid, and he explained to me, he gave me a long explanation, which I don't remember, but he did tell me, look, in order to experience light, you must go through darkness. In order to experience goodness, you have to experience bad moments. So when I woke up, I went to the top of the building where I was living. I looked down and I was no longer afraid of heights. So I went to the tallest building I could find and looked out, and I was cured. This was something overnight. And right now I have no fear of heights. So before this, I really begged my spiritual guides to help me with this, and they did. In 2001, my mother had a stroke that left her in a coma for 2 years. She never regained consciousness. So there she was, laying in her bed. I was living in another city, far away, in another state of Venezuela. But 1 year after being left in coma, while she was still unconscious, she visited me in dreams. I suddenly woke up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. This was before my experience. This was after my experience, but yeah, this was after my experience. But I all of a sudden saw her standing next to my bed. And I said, "Mother, what are you doing here?" And she said, "Look, the angels allowed me to visit you." "What angels?" "Well, I am being kept in a place that is wonderful. These angels are taking care of me." And she told me, she said she was in an intermediate realm between the realm of dreams and the spiritual realm. Okay. And she also told me that if I did some exercises and prepared myself, I could develop a dream body and go visit her. I never managed to do that. She died 1 year later. The night she died, I was not aware. I was not aware of it because I was living far away, but I did feel a presence behind me. When I turned around, there was no one there. I felt it several times, and when I looked back, there was no one there. But the following morning, I was told that she had died the previous night. So her story, which I always thought it was a dream, but in one of the Spiritual Awakenings International sharing circle, people started talking about these encounters with dead, deceased relatives in dreams. And it's known as afterlife communication. So I suddenly said, hey, what if my mother was right? What if my mother really did visit me? And what if that intermediate place she talked about is the place that near-death experiencers visit? She said she was not allowed to enter the place where dead people go. She said, since my body is not dead yet, they do not allow me to enter the spiritual realm. So they keep me here. So I said, hey, wait, that's what near-death experiencers say. They reach this place, but they are not allowed in. So they reach the entrance or the lobby of heaven. And many of them are told, hey, if you want to enter, you have to die. You will not be able to come back. If you want to go back, you can. But if you want to stay, you will never be able to come back, okay? So I said, hey, there's something here. Let me do some research. So Carl Gustav Jung determined the following. I really liked his book. I did not understand all of them, but I knew that he was into something. The unconscious, he said, is the only source of religious experience. Okay, so these are his words. This is certainly not to say that what we call the unconscious is identical with God or is set up in his place. It is simply the medium from which religious experiences seem to flow. So, yeah, perhaps dreams and near-death experiences are connected. Perhaps people do not leave their body, or they do leave their body, but their journey is within. So, according to Jung, within us, we have the conscious, we have the unconscious, then we have the collective unconscious, where dreams take place, and also mystical visions. So I said, what if the journey is within instead of outside? Carl Gustav Jung said, as to what the further cause of such a religious experience may be, the answer to this lies beyond the range of human knowledge. Knowledge of God is a transcendental problem. He never talked about God, but when he was asked, do you believe in God? And he said, no, I know God exists. I don't believe in him. So working with quantum physicist Wolfgang Pauli, Jung concluded the following: rather than an ultimate level of nature in terms of elementary particles, there is a unified primordial reality from which all derives, including the psyche. He called it the unus mundus, the one world or oneness. Here we go again. So he said that this oneness was the responsible for what he called synchronicity. The universe, the material world, works in conjunction with the psyche. Okay. So the psychic material and spiritual realms are emanations of the unus mundus, also known as the unified field by Albert Einstein, the matrix of all matter by Max Planck, known local reality by John Bell, Ein Sof hour by the Kabbalah, Brahman by Hinduism, and the Tao by Taoism. And as the Taoist book, the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao you speak about is not the Tao. So the God you speak about is not God. And really, this unus mundus that he mentioned is not the real unus mundus. But it's an idea for us to understand what this is. Carl Jung also determined the following. He said that mystical visions, as well as mystical dreams, are essentially archetypal. What does this mean? Well, he talked about the archetypes as universal patterns and images that exist in the collective unconscious and that are symbolic, meaning that everybody interprets them in their own personal way. They are innate and seem to have a life of their own. He also established the following. He said there is a fundamental difference between God, or transcendental reality, or unus mundus, or whatever name you want to call it, which is non-dual and ineffable, and what Jung called God image, which is symbolic, archetypal, dualistic, a dualistic representation, which is different for everyone. So we have God, this non-dual reality, non-local reality, and we also have what we all think God is, or how we all imagine God to be, which is different for everyone. Okay? And it's basically, this God image is an archetype, which means that we all perceive it differently. And also, if we perceive it today, it will be one way, and tomorrow it may be another way. It is not constant, okay? This God image, as well as all archetypes, they are continually transforming or adapting themselves. This is something more or less what Paramahansa Yogananda wrote in 1946. He said, God eventually appears to the persistent devotee in whatever form he holds dear. A devout Christian sees Jesus. A Hindu beholds Krishna or the goddess Kali, or an expanding light if his worship takes an impersonal turn. So I said, okay, this all makes sense. But I have never found anyone mentioning this, but I will continue my research, I said to myself. So I came up with what I call the Tower of Babel syndrome. The Babel of this syndrome basically is based on the story of the biblical story. The Bible mentions a group of humans who built a tower to reach heaven, but God dispersed them by making each of them speak a different language. So, the Tower of Babel syndrome, how can we explain it? The base of the tower represents human experience in the 3D world. It's the starting point for most people who are unaware of the higher dimensions and the subjectivity of mystical experiences. It's the common world, the 3D world. It's this physical reality. The staircase symbolizes the various paths that may lead to the higher dimensions, such as meditation, mystical visions, mystical dreams, near-death experiences, or psychedelics. People, whether they want it or not, when they have these spiritually transformative experiences, they are able to ascend from the 3D world and they approach the higher dimensions. The tip of the tower represents the superior or metaphysical dimensions. As 3D beings, we can only grasp the higher dimensions through the filter of our limited 3D perception and not as they truly are. So just like if someone who is living in the second dimension cannot perceive us three-dimensional beings, they will see a representation of us in 2 dimensions. In that same way, when we see someone from a higher dimension, we are forced to see, let's call it their shadow in 3 dimensions, their reflection, but we cannot grasp their true selves. Our 3D limitations prevent us from perceiving higher beings in their true multidimensional forms. Thus, we are forced to perceive their 3D representations or projections. These projections, as found in all mystical visions and dreams, are in essence archetypal, as Jung deduced. So, people often say, no, they take the form that best suits the disciple or the person who is perceiving this. But it's not that they choose to take the form. We have in our psyche the archetypes that they are like a translation. They translate this information from the higher planes and they transform it into these symbols or these 3D representations. So it's something like automatic that we have in our minds, okay? So the archetypal perceptions of these higher beings may vary from person to person according to their own experience, culture, and beliefs. That's something that people always mention when they talk about why near-death experiences are so different. It depends on the experience, culture, and beliefs. For example, my Jesus may have brown hair and dark eyes, while yours may be blonde with blue eyes or be perceived as a being of light. Okay, so due to the archetypal essence of these visions, we each perceive these divine figures differently. This also explains why someone may see a deceased person as being 10 years younger than when he or she died, while others may see the same deceased person as having a different age, okay? And it's also why in mystical experiences, including NDEs, some people see Jesus, while others see Buddha, Krishna, or light beings, each in their own way. God cannot present itself as it is before us. We are not capable. It's like when Arjuna asked Krishna, show yourself to me in your real form. And when Krishna started showing himself, Arjuna said, no, 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 please don't, because we cannot, it's too much for us. We cannot tolerate it. It's simply something beyond our understanding, and not only beyond our understanding, it's multi-dimensional, and we are stuck in 3D with our 3D mind, and it's larger than what we can understand or even imagine. So I always think about Arjuna when he asked Krishna, and he decided that it was better not to see Krishna's real form or God's real form. The return, once you have this experience on the top of the tower, the return represents coming back to our 3D world, but each one comes back with a different story, though with common traits. Since their versions differ, they are said to speak a different language and are often misunderstood, mocked, rejected, and even attacked. If 10 people go up the tower, when they come back, one will say, I saw Jesus. The other will say, no, 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 I saw Buddha. And the other will say, I saw Muhammad. And the other will say, I saw a being of light. And thus, they will each think that only they are right and that the others are wrong. And this confusion is similar to having people speak different languages. That's what happens with all religions. Once they are founded, they meet the rejection of other religions. So most people are directly or indirectly affected by the Tower of Babel syndrome. When people say only my religion saves or only my God is real, they are suffering the effects of this syndrome. This is something interesting. The anthropomorphic image of the divine was studied 2,500 years ago by Xenophanes, who was a pre-Socratic philosopher before Socrates and Plato. He said the following: Ethiopians say their gods are flat-nosed and black, while Thracians say that their gods have blue eyes and red hair. Yet, if cattle or horses had hands and could draw, then horses would draw their gods to look like horses and cattle to look like cattle, each making their gods in the likeness of their own. 2,500 years ago. So the benefits of understanding this syndrome: it offers NDEers a sense of legitimacy, helping them understand their experiences and reducing their feelings of isolation and misunderstanding. You know, many of them say, why did I see Buddha? Why did I see Jesus? Why are our experiences so different? Another benefit is that it can encourage more rigorous scientific investigation into NDEs, contributing to a more comprehensive understanding of both this phenomenon and how human consciousness works. It also explains the diversity of religious experiences and interpretations, not as a sign of conflict, but as the outcome of a natural process. Once people understand that their different beliefs are rooted in the same universal experiences, the grounds for religious wars and conflict may be significantly reduced. It can help to boost interfaith dialogue, offering a common language for discussing differences and similarities between the religions, and finally, including this in religious education can help young people value religious diversity, thus reducing prejudice, fostering cohesion, and making the world a better place. That's basically what I wanted to share with you all. Thank you. And I will talk a little bit about how you can contact me. My email is ajparbooks@gmail.com. I have a YouTube channel with more than 80 videos. It's called the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist, and I will continue interviewing people. If you have had a near-death experience or a spiritually transformative experience that you would like to share, please contact me. I also have an Amazon page. You can check it out at AJ Parr. And you can find more information about my research, my NDE research, in my book, Stairway to Heaven, 25 Near-Death Experiences about encounters with God, Jesus, and paradise, journalistic research on real cases. And many people have asked me what I do for a living. Well, I have a publishing agency for independent authors, and I have published many books, some of them about spiritual matters, including near-death experiences. So if you also, I also do translations from English to Spanish. If you want to publish your story, I can help you out. Call me and I will give you a free consultation. Also, if you want to translate your book. And that's it. Thank you. I am open for questions. My email is ajparbooks@gmail.com. My YouTube channel is AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist. And all I can say is thanks for coming and for hearing me out. And well, I'm open for your questions.
Awesome. Thank you, AJ, for an absolutely phenomenal presentation. I'd now like to introduce Ann Archer Butcher, a Spiritual Awakenings International board member, who is going to be moderating the question and answer period with AJ. Ann.
Thank you, Yvonne. AJ, thank you so much. There are many comments in the chat about what a wonderful presentation this is. And I want to thank you for how beautifully you illustrated it too. It was just charming to watch. And the explanations you gave were fascinating, and many people responded positively. I noticed that Mark Anthony, another author who is here, said that the comments that you made are verified by the experiences that he's had as well with other people. I have a couple of questions for you. Someone asked about the experience of spiritual emergency that you had. Now, this is an important concept in this organization. SAI talks about spiritual emergency as what happens when you have a spiritually transformative experience that you can't really integrate well into your life. And they ask, how did that come about that you had spiritual emergency? And how long did it last? And how were you able to resolve it?
Okay, so this spiritual emergency started as soon as I got back from my unitive experience, and the fact that I could not understand, and that the people who I knew could not figure it out. Some of them thought I was crazy, and the fact that all the books I read did not mention similar experiences, that was really confusing. So I tried to continue with my life, but every now and then I continued having these vivid dreams when I was not aware that I was dreaming. But every once in a while, I would have these lucid dreams in which I knew I was dreaming. And I met these guides, and these, but they were like hermetic. They did not give me much information. So I guess this continued until a few months ago, okay? I really felt bad when I shared my story with Yvonne and the rest of the team, and I was still confused. I felt guilty because I had made a promise, but a few weeks back, I had another lucid dream. The thing about lucid dreaming is the following. When you wake up when you're sleeping and you're having a dream and you are conscious that you're having a dream, you can decide to do things. I once said, okay, I want to see God. I had not read the Arjuna story, and there was like a big earthquake. The sky went black, and there was a lot of thunder. And I fell on my knees and I said, no, God, please don't, because I felt I was going to die. Okay. But I have also, when I woke, if I gain consciousness in a dream, I can do whatever I want. Okay. So sometimes I have asked for my spiritual guides. And 3 weeks ago, I had this dream. I was walking in a city and I realized I was dreaming. And I said, okay, I called my guide. And it was explained to me that it was all right to say certain things, but not all. And that the fact, and I started asking them questions, and they say, no, the fact that you're telling people about your experience makes us think it over. When we're not telling you everything because we fear that you may speak more than you should.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting, AJ. We all discover that there's a time to share and a time to keep things to ourselves based on our own inner experiences. So I appreciate that that's what you came to. And Dana would like to know, how did this analogy of the Tower of Babel come to you? It's a fascinating analogy and it makes great sense, but how did that come to you?
Okay, I had always thought when I did my comparative religion study, I realized that the spiritual knowledge or the basis of all religions was oneness. Okay, so but how come they all had a different interpretation? So I figured it occurred to me that this Tower of Babel was a metaphor. The metaphor is, if you are in the 3D world and you want to explore the spiritual world, when you come back, you will be speaking a different language because of what I said. It had not occurred to me. The part about the archetypes had not occurred to me yet. I had no explanation why, but I knew that every time someone had a mystical experience, they came back talking about different things. Okay, why do Christians say one thing? Why not only the Christian churches, but why do these mystics, St. John of the Cross or Meister Eckhart, or why do the Buddhist monks and why do the Hindu monks talk about these different deities? So I said, no, there is only one God behind it all. So it occurred to me that this was a metaphor. And lately, I originally called it the philosophy of the common man, the common explanation, or the explanation that common men need to know. And I started working on that. So this Tower of Babel theory, or the Tower of Babel syndrome, is what I first called the philosophy of the common man, which is my life purpose.
Very good. Thank you. Someone else is asking here, Tim, some people think that out-of-body experiences are actually a form of lucid dream that occurs whether you're sleeping or awake. You mentioned that you had both. Do you think there's a difference? And if so, what is the difference between these two experiences?
Okay, the basic difference is that you can have an out-of-body experience and you don't realize that you're having it. It's like when you have a normal dream, you're in, for example, you're in some foreign land, but you don't know that you're dreaming. You think you're there. So in an out-of-body experience, you may not be aware that you're having an out-of-body experience. Mm-hmm. But if you do, if you are conscious of it, yes, it is like a lucid dream.
Very good. Very good. I mentioned that Mark Anthony said this correlates with how spirits explain this during communication with spirits that have passed over. And he found that outstanding. I have a question for you that your experiences began as a child, a young child. Do you have any theory about why that happened? Was it the inclination of your family, or did you feel alone in this?
Well, at first, before I answer, I want to mention that Mark Anthony, I had a long conversation discussing my theory with Mark Anthony, and his ideas of the contained in his latest book were really fascinating, and I want to publicly thank him. Also, when I was a kid, I thought everybody could do that, you know? I thought that, yeah, everybody could wake up within the dream and do all this. I didn't realize it was called lucid dreaming until around 20 years ago. And it was all my spiritual life. I was initiated when I was 16 years old by Guru Maharaji. I received several meditation techniques. I received the transcendental meditation technique. I joined the Sant Mat group. I was a Freemason. I was searching and searching, and I found myself really alone, really misunderstood. I did not find support. My only support was in dreams. Okay, those were my guides, not the real ones. So when I was initiated in Freemasonry, I said, okay, these are people, but I want to be initiated by the higher beings. And eventually I was.
Very good. You know, there's a question here about writing all the books that you have. Do you feel that you've been affected in the process of writing as a part of your journey?
Well, I come from a family of writers, and I love to write. I've always written, and it took me almost 20 years to decide to write about this. I had written other books, but I think writing is, I'm also a musician. You know, when I was a kid, I loved to write, draw, and play music. So it's basically my essence.
Lovely. I had another question for you. Do you find that people are open to discovering the connection between all religions, and that there is an openness when you offer this explanation that wasn't there before?
Not at all. I feel that people are very affected by the Tower of Babel syndrome. They think that only their religion saves, only their God saves. And I see a lot of conflict, even among Christians. They have different sects. The Catholics don't like the Protestants, and even between the different sects, they say only we have the truth. They don't. So I think that is terrible. Every time I try to talk about this with someone, I've only felt rejection. I thought I was going to be rejected today. I really was.
Well, I think quite the opposite is true with this audience. So I think perhaps your audience matters, AJ, because this audience is open, and many of them already have a rather high level of awareness. And so what you're saying is falling on open hearts and minds both. So we appreciate your presentation tremendously today. And the comments that you'll see in the chat room certainly support that concept. We embrace your thoughts and your research, people are saying, and there is no rejection here. There's a lot of gratitude for your amazing words, your truth, and the humility with which you present it. So I'm just sharing what everyone is sharing here. I also wondered about this concept in the story that you shared, where you said you wanted to be famous, and that's why you wanted to write. And you knew immediately, it was as if the universe was saying, wrong answer.
Right.
And I believe that in my discussion with you earlier, you were saying that you knew that the answer was service. That would have been the appropriate answer, or for you to grow spiritually would have been an appropriate answer. But with the work that you're doing, do you feel now that you have moved into a level of service that allows you to feel much more open about what you're sharing and doing?
Okay, let me explain this. When you want to learn anything, let's say I want to learn how to play chess. The answer cannot be I want to learn how to play chess because I want to write a book. No, first learn, And after that, if you're good at it, write a book. I want to learn how to ride a horse. Why? Because I want to write a book. So the same answer is wrong for anything you want to learn. You see?
Mhm.
So it's not necessarily only for the spiritual aspect or the spiritual matters. If you want to learn how to do anything, how to play guitar, yeah, well, guitar is different because many people learn guitar because they want to be famous. But first learn and then worry about if you want to be famous or not. Because when you think of the outcome, and in spiritual things, it's really important, this attitude of not thinking about the outcome. So there in spiritual matters, you have to embrace knowledge with humility and not with egocentric interests.
Very good. Catherine just shared something that I think sums up what a lot of people are saying. When speaking to an audience of spiritual experiencers like you are here, you're preaching to the choir, of course, we get it. She writes, oneness, love, unity is the common thread of all religions and faith traditions, and love is our religion. I'm wondering about that concept of love, because I know that you've studied comparative world religions as I did, and I found that love was an underpinning to everything. Do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Well, yeah, love seems to be the central root of all religions, but love is equal to God. God is love. Jesus talked a lot about love, but not only Jesus. In all religions, God is taken as one of the key factors that unite us all. And this, what love is recognizing the feeling that we share existence. So our natural condition is love, basically.
Beautiful. Again, Mark Anthony commented, it takes courage to go onto the world stage with your experiences, and he thanks you. Others, Ann Swanson says, gratitude for sharing your story. Dana Taylor says, we congratulate your courage to present these ideas. And so you can see, I think the door has been opened to a true appreciation for what it is that you're sharing. And I was fascinated with the uniqueness of the concept of the Tower of Babel syndrome. I actually liked it as a syndrome because it does appear to be a source of great conflict in the world. And you say you feel that this is your mission. And today, I think you've done a fabulous job presenting your mission to us. So thank you, AJ.
No, thank you. On the contrary, I'm the one who's supposed to be thanking you for allowing me to present this. And especially the people who showed up today. I'm really grateful. I would like to have the chat, all the comments made in the chat. I don't know if it's possible. If not, I will try to copy it right now.
Yes, no, you'll be able to see them. And thank you so much. I really have to wrap it up now, but I want to thank you again, AJ, and we'll go back to Yvonne Cason, president of SAI, to close. Thank you so much.
Thank you, AJ. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, AJ, for an absolutely phenomenal presentation. And somebody commented in the chat that speaking to people who've had STEs, spiritually transformative experiences like us, you're preaching to the choir, because we have glimpsed those upper levels, and you explained it very beautifully, very eloquently. Thank you very much, AJ, for an absolutely fabulous presentation.